Before this video begins, I need to address one huge milestone that I reached. That's reaching 700 subscribers! You have no idea how happy I am! It took me a year to reach it, but I fucking did it! There is a God! And now back to the video. I see that a lot of you really enjoyed my last video on the Arabian nations. So I did a little bit of research and I'm prepared to do a part 2 on this scenario. If you're new to the channel, then please just click on the tablet right here to go watch the first episode. Or check the link below. You know, if you're old fashioned, I won't judge you. Now that you're up to date with the scenario, we are going back in time to somewhere in the 1900s. Let me draw the borders and oh look, demonetization. Well, suck on this, YouTube, I don't monetize my videos, so I can do and say whatever the fuck I want. Damn, that was a really shit joke. To specify the exact time, it's in 1967, right after the 6-Day War. The war in which Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza, some parts of Syria, and the Penis Peninsula in Egypt. I'm gonna use this as a lighting torch for my scenario. The Arabs, fearing that Israel will push into neighboring nations, would definitely panic, and would lead to them not even trusting the government at this point. The military doesn't help either. They showed how incapable they were, and lost to a very small and new nation at this point. Coupled with the fact that they lost a lot of territories to Israel, it's a miracle that the Arabs didn't revolt right after the... Wait. How the hell did you survive for so long? I don't really need to change a lot of things in this scenario. Everything is set there for a perfect revolution to occur. The only thing that was missing is, well, communist support. If we can change that and, well, grow the communist support within these Arab nations, then this is how my scenario is gonna start. Now, the only thing that's missing is a superpower that can supply them with the resources. Now, who is this great superpower that I'm talking about? If you honestly don't know, then I hope you die. Oh, one more thing to add. They all need to unite under one communist system. How the fuck could this scenario get even more fucking impossible than it already is? Is just, like, beyond me. Chaos would ensue in the Arabian nations, leading to the Civil War. The Civil War would be backed by the Soviets, of course, and the Warsaw Pact. Egypt would be hit less, as well they had a more competent leader, so that revolution would easily be quenched, while the other Arabian nations won't be so lucky. The first to fall would be Jordan, then, following Jordan, there would be Lebanon. Then, afterwards, Syria would eventually fall. When the Levant falls, this would give a lot of space for them to create the government and the state, so most likely the country would unite at this time. But here's our first problem. Iraq. It's been 1 year since the war, and Iraq is no closer to capitulation. This is because Iraq has a much suitable military and is more allied to the West at this point. But let's just say that they fucked up and the West doesn't help them and, you know, continue with the scenario like nothing happened. After 2 years of conflict, Iraq would be annexed, and this would finally create our communist Arabia. Some of you may think that this communist Arabia's goal would be to invade the rest of the Middle East and conquer the other Arab nations. where this is where I call you a dumbass and tell you to shut the fuck up. First of all, no, they would not invade other Middle Eastern countries. It's because they're tired. They've waged war for almost 2 decades with the Israelis, and they don't want another war with another Arab nation. They would be more concentrated on itself, improving culture and economy. Before we get to the fun stuff, we need to select the capital. It would most likely be the capital of the former Arabian nations. Damascus from Syria, Iraq's capital of Baghdad, as well as Jordan's capital of Who Cares 1, and Lebanon's capital of Who Cares 2. It's kinda obvious who's gonna be the capital, but let's continue with this gag. It's more of a battle between Damascus and Baghdad. Damascus being the more cultural capital, while Baghdad being overall more populated and much more developed. A fun fact to tell you all. The Jordanian capital that I neglect to mention, Amman, is more populated than Damascus. Yeah. Due to its population, I'll say that Baghdad would be the capital of this new Arabian nation. So that's our first problem done. Now comes the biggest problem that we face. The problem is, this region has a lot of Arabian dialects, which could make communication very hard. The only way that I see this being fixed is when we start to standardize the language. If we standardize it and people are speaking the standard language in, well, the most populous city like the capital and the capital of the former Arabian nations, then it would be much easier to start communicating with other regions. The problem with this, however, is the time. It takes a lot of time to, well, standardize an entire country. But let's be generous to the Arabs, and let's just say by 10 years, 90% of the country are fully speaking the standardized Arabian language. This could potentially influence other nations around this Arabian nation to start speaking the standard Arabian language. The countries that would most likely be heavily influenced is Kuwait, the West Bank, Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. This will impact the nation a lot as it was capable of influencing neighbors around them, giving them an image of being superior and, well, more powerful than other Arabian nations. It's at this moment that Omar realizes that he's not making an ultra-nationalist Arabia. This will give this Arabian nation a lot of mixed opinions. First of all, the Arabian governments of other Arabian nations would most likely hate it and would see it more as a threat towards, well, their safety. While the population of these nations would love this Arabian nation. It's more like a romantic fantasy towards them, as, well, speaking the standard language of Arabian is seen as the highest level of intelligence in Arabia. That's backed with zero facts. Now that culture, infrastructure, and the economy is, well, much more developed and fixed, they will set their sights on other Arabian nations, the first being Qatar and Saudi Arabia. They would most likely stage coups on these countries or start up civil wars on them. Then later on, they would fully annex them. All of this could happen within the 1990s. I really need a bigger map, so please just give me a second. Don't mind the fact that I forgot that northern Yemen existed, so yeah. Let's continue. After this, their goal would most likely be to capture the rest of the Arabian Peninsula, which means Yemen would be the next target. Then, after this, the most likely target would be Egypt, but because they don't control the Suez Canals and they would most likely be still occupied at this time, it's pretty unlikely. Sudan, being in a civil war, could easily join this Arabian Union, and the Arabs would most likely help the North Sudanese to defeat the South. After this, the most likely target would be Libya, so Libya falls to the communists. This would most likely mean that Egypt would definitely join the communists as well. So, after this, the most likely targets would be Tunisia and Oman. So let's just say that they fall to the communists because I'm really tired of speaking. The countries of the Maghreb would be a problem. They would most likely never join the Union. But because this is an alternate scenario, they would join this Union. How? Because that's how it fucking works. It's the 2000s, and there are only a couple of areas that the communists don't control. These areas are highlighted in yellow. The Palestinian territories and the Penis Peninsula would most likely be annexed by Israel, due to the fact that there was a communist threat among them and the United States and the Western powers just allowed them to annex it. The other remaining countries would not join this union due to the fact that they're much richer and more allied to the West. But this would not pose any problems as the two are, well, six Arab nations are very friendly to each other. Now, there are some things that I didn't mention in this scenario, so I'll just quickly run over all of them. First of all, Turkey and Iran would most likely be in a bigger communist threat in our timeline. This could actually mean that when the Iranian Revolution occurs, Iran could be invaded by two different fronts, from the north and from the south. The north most likely being communist while the south being allied to the west. In Africa, a lot of nations would be heavily influenced by this Arabia. They would most likely fall into communist regimes or most likely be allied to the communists. This could mean that Israel might even join NATO. So, in conclusion, this Arabian nation would most likely have a projection of power same as China in our timeline, would most likely have nuclear weapons either developed by itself or given by the Soviet Union, economy flourishing, which would help the Cold War to last longer. Let's just step back and admire how much they have achieved. In a matter of 5 decades, they've gone from an almost isolationist Middle Eastern dictatorship to one of the most powerful countries in the world. And this concludes the video. Now, I have two things to say. First of all, my fucking throat hurts, and I really want to die.
Hosanna